Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. Sorry about these few technical difficulties that we had. It was what I worried about most, honestly. I'm quite confident that today's meeting will be interesting to all of you here. It was just the technicalities that got me worried. So my name is Maria Murray Ryman. I'm the Executive Director of WomenNC, and I welcome all of you to our 11th year at the NGO CSW Forum. Pleased to be here and thankful that all of you can join us, whether you're on Facebook Live or whether you are with us on the platform, on the Pathable platform. Before we actually begin today's event, I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping. And actually, before I do that, I want to stress to you a belief that undergirds our leadership training program. And that is as follows. We believe that leadership correctly understood must come from a place of fact and knowledge. And that's what we aim to provide to our scholars, and why I believe we've been so effective over the last 11 years. All right, so that's my introduction. Now let me just say a few things about housekeeping. Over the next hour and a half, you're going to get to know many of the people involved in WomenNC, and I'll introduce them shortly. But we would like to get to know you a little bit, you, our audience. And how do we do that? Well, one way is to let us know who you are. Who is here listening and engaging with us. And I've got a link in the chat box. It's I think the second chat. It's a link to a Google form. And I ask all of you who are present if you would fill out that Google form so that we know who you are. And it'll take you about 15 seconds to do so. And several of our colleagues will be posting that link throughout the meeting, but it's up there right now. And as I'm speaking and doing these introductions, if you would click on that Google form and let us know who you are, we would certainly appreciate it. The next item of housekeeping is that we will take questions and comments in the chat box. We're not going to be taking questions verbally from all of you, but if you have questions and comments as the meeting progresses, we ask that you type your comments in the chat box, and we will have some of our colleagues note those chats, and there will be time at the end of the event for you to have some of those answered and addressed. So please do, as the meeting goes along, whether you're on Facebook Live or whether you're on the platform, do type in your questions and comments into the chat box. We will be monitoring those chat boxes. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Give me just a moment. And here we go. Here we go. All right. Let me go back up to my first slide. And here we go. Let me just pause for a moment. Hannah, are we on Facebook Live? We are not on Facebook Live. All right, give me just a moment, because even though I suggested we were on Facebook Live, we're not. So give me just a moment while I attempt to fix this right now. Give me one moment. All right, Hannah, will you okay, we are now on Facebook Live. For those of you who just joined us on Facebook Live, we have a chat box and we have a Google form in the chat. We'd love to know who you are, and if you would sign in, we would certainly appreciate it. You'll get to know who we are. We'd like to know who you are. Apologies for the technical difficulties, my greatest fear as we went into this. Anyway, we've been here for 11 years. We, WomenNC, have been coming to the NGO Forum at CSW for 11 years. And I want to tell you about who we are. I've asked you to fill out that Google form, the link of which is in the chat. So let me tell you a little bit about who we are here right now. First are our scholars, and you can see some of their young faces on your screens. You'll hear more about them in a moment, but who are they? They are young feminist leaders taking on the challenge of making the world a better place for women and girls. That's the first kind of person that's here with us this morning. Then we have someone who's in a category of her own, Beth Dagan, who's the founder, longtime head of WomenNC, who more than 11 years ago had an idea to create a nonprofit whose vision was to train a generation that honors human rights. And you'll hear from her a little bit later in the program. We also have two people from RTI's Global Gender Center. Its head, Dr. Wendy Wexberg, she runs the Global Gender Center, and she's also WomenNC's board president. And we also have with us Dr. Felicia Brown, a social epidemiologist and senior research public health analyst at RTI. And perhaps even more importantly for our purposes here, a 2-year veteran femtor, what we call our mentors, and she's soon to be a 3-year veteran femtor with us. Dr. Felicia Brown is also with us. Also by way of introduction, I would like to remind you about the question that this forum seeks to address, the whole CSW seeks to address. How is it that women can achieve full and effective participation and decision-making in public life? That's the question that animates CSW 65. And we believe the answer to that question lies in training and supporting the next generation of leaders to understand the situation of women on the ground. And then doing the following: investigating and researching and exploring specific instances of gender disparity in particular communities. This then results in suggestions for policy change, which then implies the role for advocacy in moving the needle forward, changing the status quo, improving the status quo. I want to say it again. At WomenNC, we believe that leadership, correctly understood, must come from a place of fact and knowledge, and that is what we aim to provide to our scholars. And concurrent with that, and because of this belief in what leadership entails, the young leaders in this program have had a tangible impact on gender equality in local North Carolina communities, with scholars using their research project to advocate for changes ranging from dress code policies and gender-affirming healthcare to changes in school curricula and agricultural policy. So, how did this nonprofit come about? And for that, I am going to turn to Beth Dagan, who is going to tell us a little bit more about how WomenNC and this whole leadership training program came to be. Beth? Oh, you're muted, Beth. Beth, are you there? Oh, I think Beth might have a little internet problem. Beth, if you can hear us, we will come back to you when and if you can get your internet fixed. We see you, but we can't hear you, and you're kind of frozen in time. So we'll hear from Beth in a little bit. Hopefully she can rejoin us, and we'll hear from Beth about her vision for WomenNC in just a few minutes. So let me continue to speak and tell you a little bit more about the contours of the leadership training program now as it exists and how it's evolved. And here I want to boast a little bit and say a few words about our three-pronged program with research,
Hello?
policy. Oh, are you back, Beth?
Yes. Did you hear me at the beginning, or I was?
No, we haven't heard you at all. So why don't I stop and let you talk about your vision and the history of WomenNC?
Sure, I do it very briefly. Hello, everybody. Welcome to WomenNC's parallel event and to CSW 64. It is always fun to be at CSW. I had the privilege to participate in CSW sessions for the past 27 years. I haven't even missed 1 year. And it has been always very inspirational, and it generates a lot of energy and enthusiasm for the participants when they see like-minded NGOs, government agencies, men and women who are pushing for to give the momentum to gender equality movement. After 30 years of advocacy work for gender equality movement in the Middle East, Europe, Canada, in the United States, and working closely with the CSW, I had no doubt that our gender equality movement not only needed the participation of young individuals, male and female, but it also demanded their active presence in the leadership. I firmly believe that the establishment of an intergenerational collaboration between experienced leaders and the youth would create a positive momentum in the movement. Every year when I was at CSW session, the passion of having a group of North Carolina students at the global gathering of CSW at the UN grew stronger and stronger in my heart. Learning and understanding about CEDAW Convention on the Eliminations of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or in another word, the Bill of Rights for Women, and knowing what a grand gift passing of CEDAW would bring to gender equality for women would seize the sleep from my eyes. Two acronyms, CSW and CEDAW, put a spark in my dream to find WomenNC. The journey was full of unknowns and challenges, but my passion and persistence were energizing elements to move forward. I shared my idea with a couple of some veteran activists who had been working for ratification of CEDAW in North Carolina for several years. With their know-how and contribution, we registered WomenNC as a new nonprofit. After formation of board, we immediately jump-started our leadership training program, regardless of the financial challenges ahead of us. Simply by recruiting dedicated volunteers, we moved the organization forward. Since 2010, we have provided the opportunity for our undergraduate students to conduct research on the status of women locally and to share their findings at global stage of CSW with other NGOs. The outcome was inspirational. We were able to train more than 70 undergraduate students, most of them whom turned out to be committed advocates for gender equality movement in their communities, at work, and different positions in their career path. They all have made me proud of their achievements. Some of them are online right now with us. They all have made me proud of their achievements when I think of them. The scholars in 2018 helped me to receive the consultative status with the UN ECOSOC. In addition, our students' role was very, very instrumental in passage of CEDA in Durham City and County, and much more, which is beyond the scope of this session to elaborate. I am sure Dr. Ryman will address some of the key outcomes of the advocacy work of our scholars. 8 years after establishment of WomenNC, in 2017, UN Women developed a similar youth strategy to engage youth ages between 14 to 24 to push gender equality movement forward. UN Women has calculated around 1.8 billion young people aged between 10 to 24 in the world, the largest young people aged between, the largest young population ever. Today's generation of young people comprise of almost 1.8 billion of the world's population of 7.3 billion. And as UN Women Youth Strategy indicates, the new 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is largely about youth and for youth. Therefore, we cannot dismiss today's young men and young women as solely the beneficiaries of the development or even as the leaders of tomorrow, for they are already leading today. The force and inspiration of our youngest leaders represent one of the critical drivers for accelerating progress on sustainable development and gender equality. Even last year, as you may all know, UN Women took a stronger step for youth involvement in gender equality movement by crafting Generational Equality Forum to accelerate the implementation of principles of CEDA and Beijing Platform for Action. Generational Equality Forum is a collaboration of civil society, philanthropists, intergenerational leaders, private sectors, public sectors, and young people. As the executive director of UN Women says, young people at the center of gender equality. Young people are at the center of Generational Equality Forum. The UN Women Youth Leadership Program includes the same component that WomenNC's leadership training had: mentorship or femtorship, researching the status of women locally with a specific policy recommendation, participation in decision-making tables such as global gatherings and CSW sessions. The program are very similar. The program that UN Women has developed and the program that we started 11 years ago. WomenNC's youth leadership training and UN Women Youth Strategy is grounded in CEDA and Beijing Platform for Action. I stop right here, and if you have any question, please don't hesitate to write in your chat box. Thank you very much for listening. Enjoy the CSW.
Thank you, Beth. Really appreciate that. And once again, as Beth invited you to do, please note any comments or questions as this meeting progresses in the chat boxes. And also for those of you, especially on Facebook Live, when I didn't quite have the technology right, we do have a Google form, which some of our colleagues will put in the chat box. We'd love to know who you are. You're getting to know a little bit about us. Please fill out that 15-second Google form so that we know who you are in our audience. And again, note your questions and comments there as well. So I'm going to say just a few words because you really don't want to hear from us. I know you want to hear from our leaders, but let me tell you just a little bit about the program. I want to boast, as I said earlier, about our three-pronged program with research, public policy, and advocacy at its core. It's not another program. It's not a program to write another paper that sits on a metaphorical shelf. Instead, in our program, the research paper forms the basis for scholars to advance public policy solutions that then requires their advocacy in order to fulfill them. The program is also not a college class with a professor and students. It is a program instead that pairs WomenNC scholars one-on-one with mentors, femtors, who are affiliates of RTI's Global Gender Center. We do come together over the course of the program for workshops that train scholars in such topics as gendered public policy, and public speaking and presentation skills. But at the heart of the program is the belief that mentorship provides a solid basis for young leaders to be successful. And you'll hear from one of our mentors or femtors, Felicia Brown, in just a bit about her work. Our program is also a true collaboration. It's a true collaborative effort between WomenNC, several North Carolina colleges and universities, RTI's Global Gender Center, as well as the advocacy partners that work with WomenNC scholars to find appropriate venues, people, and institutions for them to make the case for their public policy solutions and to turn those solutions into action. We have here in the WomenNC Leadership Training Program truly engaged research that inspires action. Finally, just a few words about our timeline. Our program used to run about 8 months long, and we decided that was really not quite long enough to engage in the research and public policy formation as well as the advocacy. So this year's incoming scholars, our application is open for those of you who are listening on our website. It's due in about a month. This year's incoming scholars will begin their work in June, in just a few months instead of the usual September, so that they will have sufficient time to devote to advocacy, which includes CSW 66 in the spring of 2022, we hope. Paired with advocacy partners and given sufficient time to develop an advocacy strategy, we believe that the women and girls in North Carolina will truly reap the benefits of our scholars' work. And again, I want to underscore that we are training leaders, and at the same time, we are working to improve the lives of women and girls on the ground. And I think with that, I'm going to stop and actually have Dr. Wendy Wexberg, who is head of the RTI's Global Gender Center and WomenNC's board president, say a few words about her work with WomenNC, as well as what the Global Gender Center does. Dr. Wendy?
Thank you, Maria. And I want to thank Beth, who is truly our shero to have started WomenNC. And you can tell from the breadth and her commitment over decades that she brings the passion to our organization. And yes, the Gender Center has gotten involved. Beth and Maria came to me quite a few years ago and said, we'd really like you to be involved in our program. And I saw what was going on with scholars that were in their program that they at that time called fellows. And as you can imagine, as a feminist, I said, well, we're going to change it first to scholars and begin to change the language. But let me first tell you about our Global Gender Center. And I do want to say our coordinator, Brittany Howard, is here, which I want to say, Brittany, probably you're the one who got me to start using the word femtor as opposed to mentor, which I really like because we have to continue to work on less stigmatizing and more feminist language. But so I'm Wendy Wexberg, she, her, hers at RTI. If you don't know what RTI is, it stands for Research Triangle Institute. We were started over 60 years ago with the local universities in North Carolina, Duke, UNC and state who are still on our Board of Governors. And the Global Gender Center has been in existence now over 7 years. And we've grouped our work in economic empowerment, as you can see, health and wellness, educating girls and women, ending gender violence. But those are big, groups, and we really would like you to visit our website and see that we've worked in over 80 countries, and our affiliates, internal and external, is growing if you're interested, and look at our impact stories. As you'll see, one of our scholars that you'll hear from today has actually been working with us as an intern in our program. So what I'd like to say about why we've made a commitment to be part of, and how I fell in also to be president, sounds very incestuous, is that I do believe in starting as early as possible in helping young scholars become researchers. And having been a clinician earlier in my career, I really did find that in research and learning good methods, ultimately, if you answer the question and use good methods, you will change practice. And that is the fluid process as you hear from Beth, is for the activism, because in the end, you're changing policy to change practice. And so if we're working with young women, and you heard how many youth are in the world, if we address culture and context from local to global, we're actually going to address gender inequalities. So you're going to hear from our scholars, and it's going to be facilitated by Dr. Felicia Brown, who I'm happy to call a colleague for over 15 years. And hear how if you start young and they have good methods, you're also going to hear that these young women are really going to be our truly next leaders in gender work. So enjoy the rest of our session. And I'm turning it over to Bridget. And I want to tell you one thing about a board and building a strong board is you have to have a board with an incredible complexion of people. And Bridget is now on the WomenNC board. So I'm happy to welcome her as our next speaker. Bridget.
Thank you so much, Wendy. It is good to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Bridget Pitman Blackwell. I am a first year's master's student at North Carolina Central University. And when I was a WomenNC scholar, my research was an examination of dress code policies in Durham, which is my community. And I looked at body shame, sexualization, and the learning environment of African-American middle school girls. My current affiliations, like I mentioned, I'm getting my master's in general psychology at North Carolina Central University. I'm also working at RTI as a communications associate intern. And then, as Wendy mentioned, I am also now on the board of directors for WomenNC. Some of my former affiliations in undergrad, I was a McNair Scholar, a part of Collegiate 100, National Council of Negro Women, and then also a part of Psi-Chi International Honor Society in psychology. For my future, I definitely would love to continue my research in what I've done in the past, and that's essentially continuing my research, advancing studies in psychology that focuses on mental health and physical health disparities and gender differences among African Americans. And now I will pass it off to my colleague, Issa.
Hello, everyone. My name is Issa Vanderdrift. I'm currently a research assistant intern at RTI International, working very closely with Dr. Wexberg as well as Dr. Brown in the Substance Use, Gender, and Applied Research team, as well as with the Global Gender Center. I just graduated this past May from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where I studied peace, war, and defense with the concentration in national and international security, as well as Asian studies with the concentration in Arab cultures. At UNC, I was a Moorhead Kane Scholar, which allowed me to intern both at the United States Institute of Peace with their Gender Policy and Strategy team, as well as the International Center for Research on Women with their Policy and Advocacy program. And both of those experiences really instilled in me a passion for working within the gender sector, particularly at the intersection of research and advocacy, which led me to participate in WomenNC's program, where I studied the barriers to reproductive health education and its intersections with economic empowerment among young women in Durham, North Carolina. where I conducted an environmental analysis of Durham, looking at what resources are available to young women, as well as doing a comparative analysis to other communities in the southeastern United States to gain an understanding of what policies could be implemented to improve the lives of young women in Durham. In the future, I hope to pursue either a master's or a PhD in a program that allows me to continue working within applied research at the intersection of international development, gender work, health, and resource access. Thank you, and I'll pass it off to the next speaker, who I believe is Nyla.
Hi everyone, my name is Nyla and I'm a master's student in environmental health at Harvard University. I recently graduated from North Carolina State University with degrees in biomedical engineering and interdisciplinary studies. As part of my time at Harvard, I've been blessed to be a part of the Harvard Healthy Buildings team. Before WomenNC, I was an association of student government delegate, where all 16 UNC system schools congregate monthly to pass legislation that affects students on all our campuses. In this role, I co-wrote legislation to remove the UNC Board of Governors ban on gender-inclusive housing, where students were unable to live in housing that matched their gender identity. And this motivated me to do more to advocate for transgender students and specifically research gender-affirming healthcare at these institutions through WomenNC. I looked at the state of gender-affirming healthcare, and this entailed trying to see how health professionals in this setting are trained to best support this population, and if students had the necessary support to navigate accessing healthcare with regard to their gender identity. I was able to use this knowledge to assist with creating a Harvard public health course focused on transgender and gender nonconforming health. And in my roles at State, I was also a Park Scholar and previously a United World College Southeast Asia student who was a Shelby Davis Scholar. In the future, I'll be serving as a USAID Foreign Service Health Officer, as I'm a 2020 USAID Donald M. Payne Fellow, and I'm hoping to address environmental health disparities. I'll be passing it off to Siani.
Maria, could you mute, please?
Yeah, it's not me.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Siani Antoine. I'm a recent graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where I majored in history, United States history with a minor in African American diaspora studies. While at Carolina, I had the pleasure of working with WomenNC, and my project was on oral health disparities in women within rural Eastern North Carolina. Currently, I am a Master's of Public Health student at UNC Chapel Hill's Gilling School of Global Public Health, where I'm studying maternal, child, and family health, and I'm also getting a certificate in innovation for the public good. Currently, I'm also working with UNC Keenan Flagler Business School in their Entrepreneurship Center, where I am an eShip Scholar. And in the future, I hope to carry on my oral health interests and working in implementation of programs that decrease inequities in communities. So focusing on dental public health or either maternal and child health and figuring out how to intersect my two interests. And also I am currently working on developing a breastfeeding support business that focuses on women of color. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'll pass it on to Jackie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jackie Lanning. I'm a first-year Master's of Public Health student at Emory University, where I study epidemiology. And I'm also an epidemiology assistant at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, specifically in the National Center for Birth Defects and Developmental, that's a difficult word, disabilities. I graduated from North Carolina State Universities with a bachelor's in biology. And as a WomenNC scholar, I focused on researching the impact of environmental toxins on maternal and child health. I researched the different risk factors in Durham, North Carolina, and collaborated with a nonprofit to distribute a survey to assess the attitudes and awareness of residents with an increased risk to see where their knowledge is at with regards to environmental toxins. And in the future, I plan to continue to lead epidemiological research that addresses health disparities, as well as earn my doctorate. And I'll pass it off to Dr. Brown.
Thank you so much. So Good morning, everyone. So first, again, my name is Felicia Brown. I'm a research social epidemiologist at RTI, and I have the distinct honor to moderate this discussion with the scholars today. And as you can see just from their brief presentations alone, they are quite impressive, and it's even more remarkable to think about, with everything going on in this past year, what they've been up to, and just, I mean, they were already very impressive, but just to see how much they've accomplished so far. So I'm really excited to be able to delve into some of these things and hear what they've learned through the program, as well as since being in the program. So my first question, I really want to open it up to you all. And I want to know, how has the WomenNC Youth Leadership Training Program inspired you in what you are doing?
So for me, being a part of the WomenNC Youth Leadership Training Program, it has definitely inspired me to continue research. As a Black woman in research, I don't see a lot of women who look like me. I don't see a lot of faces that look like mine. And that connection with WomenNC, it gave me all of that access to all of these amazing women in research doing all these different things in their own respective fields. And being able to be a part of something like that, to see all the diversity with all the different fields and all of these women who are doing all of these things in their fields, it was definitely something to kind of encouragement almost, to see the actual fruits of their labor and see what they were doing to keep pushing you and inspire you in their own way when they're communicating with you, when they're meeting with you, and just the passion that these connections have had with WomenNC. It has definitely inspired me to keep going with my research.
I definitely like to second what Bridget said. I think WomenNC for me inspired me to continue going and working within the field of research, both because it provided me a network and connections to be able to work in the position that I am now, but also because it really gave me the confidence and a sense of ownership over a research project, which was really important to me. I think going into university, I kind of had this view of research as being sort of a bird's eye view project that didn't necessarily interact or impact the lives of the people or idea or phenomenon that it was researching. And so I think it was really WomenNC's program that inspired me to think of research differently and how it can push forward and push advocacy. And I think because of that, it's definitely inspired and has everything to do with the work I'm doing now and what I hope to accomplish in the future.
Working with WomenNC really showed me how gender can inform our research. That was really what first motivated me to apply to the program. As a biomedical engineering student, none of my research really thought about gender dynamics. And as we've seen with COVID-19, everything affects gender differently, whether it's the rate of people leaving their jobs or access to childcare. So that's been really important to know as I carry on with continuing research, and a perspective I've been able to bring to different spaces that hadn't really thought about how gender might affect environmental exposure. It also really pushed me to look at advocacy. Before I would have thought, just write a journal article about something, but now I'm thinking about how can I communicate what I'm finding to the general public. I'm a first author on a paper, and now we're looking at what social media post can we be designing to get our findings out? How can we be writing op-eds? My PI, who's been an amazing mentor, is saying, he goes on CNN and has shown me that there's so many different ways to communicate what we're finding, and we just need to get out of our comfort zone and get comfortable with going where the public and our research people need us to be.
Yeah, I agree with all the other scholars that I think the really unique piece about this program was the opportunity to not only conduct research, but then connect it to this bigger sphere of policy and advocacy. I think so much in school, at least, we think of these as very siloed fields, but this program gave me the opportunity to branch both of these interests and gave me experience to engage with nonprofits or to speak with people in policy and come with a research background, but know how to navigate those types of conversations. And so that has inspired me going forward in my research of, as you're writing the journal article, like you said, Nyla, about how do you expand that outer of how do you connect this with the public or other stakeholders who may be looking for different pieces of information.
Yeah, I'd like to second what everyone said. Another part for me was the local to global part of WomenNC that really affected me. For me, I knew I wanted to stay in North Carolina with my graduate school experience, and I knew I wanted to focus on women and girls in the future. And so I knew advocacy was a huge part for me, especially being a Black woman as well. And I wanted to do community-based work. And so from WomenNC, I was able to get that experience. And yeah, I carried it on in my daily work now.
It's, just, I mean, I know that I've seen you all sort of develop in the program, and it's interesting to see some of the similarities and sort of some of the lessons that you've learned in terms of how to best disseminate, research. And that's something that we're always grappling with as researchers. So I think it's great to see that from the program, you took some of those skills and you're really able to apply it to what you're doing so early on in your career. And I think even just some of the things, I think Bridget, what you had talked about even just seeing, being inspired by the people who you're working with and seeing, as you said, the fruits of their labor is something very powerful as well. So it's great to hear what you all have, how you all have been inspired, I should say. So now I want to target my next question to Isa and Nyla in particular, but others feel free to answer as well. How has your view of leadership changed since participating in this program?
Yeah, I can start. So I came into, like I kind of mentioned before as well, I think I came into university with this idea of leadership being a very large project. Like leaders were figures on campus like a student body president or leaders of a nation or leaders of large organizations. And I think my work with WomenNC really taught me that leadership is local. And I think that idea of the global to local forum really instilled that in me as well. And although we didn't get the opportunity to actually go to New York, I think what I would have learned from that too, and being able to go to so many wonderful events that target sort of very specific communities, is just that idea that you don't necessarily need to be the president of a country to impact and enact really important change. And I think that idea of leadership being local translate not just to, working in your local community, but also the relationships you have in terms of mentorship or femtorship too. How you can lead someone and empower someone to really achieve their best, their best selves. So I think for me, my idea of leadership has really sort of changed from this idea of someone who's a figurehead to, how can you work within your local communities and within your relationships and where you have the opportunity to lead others and to inspire others as well.
I had two big leadership takeaways. The first being the importance of relationships. A lot of what Isa said resonated with me because before WomenNC, I really thought a lot of leadership was you have a fancy title, you're doing this big task, you're delegating. But after that, I learned how so much of leadership is actually relationship building and working with people. And that's how you really make sustainable change that lasts beyond your time there. So many of us were only in college 4 years. So you can't just leave something and assume it'll stay the way it is. You have to build these valuable partnerships that will keep this important work ongoing. The second lesson I learned is that anyone can be a leader who makes political change right now. I know a lot of us have seen Greta or Sunrise or all of these young people who are making amazing change, but I didn't always believe that was something that I could be doing at my age and assumed like I could do maybe some local things. But this experience, we had to write our own executive summaries and write, how can we make a change? And that's inspired me now to keep doing that work. I've been able to do public commenting for the EPA and say, this is environmental policy that needs to be advanced, or encouraging people to apply for Biden appointments. So there's so much we as young people can be doing.
I mean, and I like the fact that you both touched on something that I sort of learned over the years myself, is that anyone can be a leader, and it's not necessarily, as you said, the title or the position, but it's really about these quote unquote, sometimes even what can be perceived as sort of the small things that people do that enact change. And I think that's a very powerful lesson as you all are leaders to sort of, as you pass that on to other people too. So I appreciate those thoughts. Does anyone else, I mean, I have some other questions I'd like to ask, but if anyone would like to also chime in as well, please feel free. So
yeah, I just want to, sorry, Felicia, but I just like want to emphasize something, and especially I think here at CSW that Nyla and Isa touched on, is like the importance of listening to other people and building these connections, especially in advocacy work, because the issues that we're talking about have existed far beyond our generation. And so especially just hearing from other leaders who have been doing this work for so long, how important it is to connect with those people and learn from them what their lessons have been, and then using the power that we have as young people, just combining that and moving forward. I think that's such an important part that Nyla and Isa talked about.
Awesome. And it actually leads me right into my next question. So I appreciate that reflection. So in thinking about lessons learned as well, I think one of the things that a lot of us as femtors or mentors have tried to do is thinking about ways of passing on lessons learned. And that's been a big part of at least a lot of our journeys. And so thinking about, in particular for Bridget and Siani, in what ways are you passing on lessons learned about leadership to others?
Yeah, definitely. I can answer that question. In my time as a scholar, my femtor, Erin Dobbins, one of the very first lessons that she taught me, not only just in research, but kind of just in life in general, was to always bring someone with you. And in doing so, when we first met up, we had gone to this coffee shop to talk about what kind of research I was going to do for my WomenNC project. And before we even sat down, before we even started the discussion, we got coffee and we got muffins, and she paid for my food. And I thought it was so kind of her to do that because she didn't have to. And so in a way that made the whole conversation and the whole experience so much easier. And in that, when we finished, her point was to, when I had my own young woman that was under me in research, under me for whatever position I would be in, as I am leading her and training her, pay for her food, continue that tradition, that experience of paying for someone's food. And in a way, it kind of builds a bond, so almost. Food, people can bond over food. And that experience, just seeing her generosity and seeing how she led and giving me that own lesson and taking someone with me, but also having that empathy at the same time, especially in the field of research. I have taken that with me. And my mentee that I have with me now, she's been with me for 2 years, and she has seen everything from the good, the bad, all of my, not only just my success, but also the stuff that I haven't always gotten right. She's had a front row seat to that. And every time we've met up, I've always paid for her food. And so continuing that tradition that my femtor taught me from WomenNC, that has to be not only one of my most important lessons in research, but just one of my most important lessons in life.
I love that. That's very, it's like a very tangible thing, but it clearly means a lot more than just paying for food, as you said. It's like you're passing on that tradition, and it's a way of bonding as you're doing this work. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, just to second Bridget, like my mentor or my femtor, she has mostly been a reflection of leadership for me. And I really do try to model her. She was always uplifting others and, helping to educate me. And, really, she gave a more holistic approach to her leadership process. So that's something I'm trying to do as well is, not only are we looking at, the work that we're doing, like with what we were doing WomenNC, the research portion, but she was actually caring enough to know about like me mentally, me personally. And so I think having that holistic idea of like how you want to have a relationship with someone is really essential in, having a good leadership style. And so, yeah, I think it's very important to, check up on people outside of the work setting and really establish that good relationship.
Nice. Does anyone else want to share any other ways that they're passing on leadership lessons to other people?
I'm happy to share one way. I've been able to go back to campus, and we have a really robust minority engineering program. And through this time, I tried to really talk to them about how can you be preparing for the future. As a Park Scholar, I was given so much guidance and leadership and push to find a mentor. And that's not training or skills that are given to every single student. And for students who are first generation, you don't have those experiences from your parents to inspire you to take certain actions. So me and a lot of our alumni are saying, how can we take lessons we've learned, privileges we've had, and make sure that students get these opportunities and know what to do? With COVID-19, so many internships have been about connections and making them quickly and adapting. So if people don't have valuable connections to rely on, we as alumni need to be there to support that, ensure that everyone isn't at home twiddling their thumbs, but is actually able to do something and learn something valuable.
Great, great. No, I think the ways that the three of you all talked about how you're passing along those lessons are really, I mean, they're very different, and I think they're all very, they have an impact and sort of showing that the next generation of, you know, how to lead, and you're passing those lessons on. And as you said, Nyla, about like the privileges and sort of those, the things that you've gained. I think that's so important. So I think as a final question before we open it up to the audience, because I know we want to make sure we have time for that. What is one thing you're most excited about that you're doing now or in the near future?
So for me, one thing I am definitely excited about, I'm excited to finish my master's. I know with the pandemic and everything starting this out, this first year is a little shaky, and it was a completely different experience because, you know, you're not always in the classroom. You're not always able to go see your professors. So the whole kind of graduate environment and experience has shifted, but even in doing so, and even still being in my classes and still being hands-on, I'm really excited to see what kind of researcher I will be, just in being under my professors and kind of hearing all of these different experiences and really seeing the whole research field from a different perspective, kind of higher up from undergrad. You're kind of closer to your goal in a sense. And I'm really excited to see how everything that I have learned, not only from undergrad, but WomenNC and all of my other experiences, how that will mold me into the researcher that I kind of see myself as being. So that's what I'm excited for.
That's very exciting.
I would say the thing that I am most excited about right now and for the future is the work that I'm doing, and that's very broad, but I think what's really exciting to me about the internship that I have currently is just the breadth of work that I'm able to assist on. I've been able to sort of see and help out with tasks related to sort of the more beginning side of research projects, as well as helping right now with sort of the ending and what do you do and how do you write papers and communicate the findings of research projects that you're working on. And so I think what's really exciting to me is just the way that I'm going to be able to carry the knowledge forward that I've gained from this experience, kind of seconding Bridget as well there, but I'm just really excited to see like what I will continue to be able to do within this position and even beyond, and how this experience will continue to shape either the degree I decide to pursue or the field that I decide to work in, or even whatever comes next. I think that's really exciting for me.
I am most excited to create a new normal as we all think about what is next for us. What does it mean after the pandemic? I'm really excited to use the lessons and partnerships I've made to improve occupational health and reduce environmental disparities. COVID-19 really pushed me to get into incarcerated work, and I really have the North Carolina Department of Public Health, Harvard Healthy Buildings team, and Harvard Liberation Lab for really showing me that this is something I can be doing, of writing guidance, writing things that actually leads to change, and possibly turning that into policy to build these connections and partnerships forever.
I'm excited, kind of similar vein as Bridget. I was kind of on my way to getting my degree. I'm excited to enter a new femtorship with my thesis advisor and get started on that. I'm holding on to the excitement of my thesis because I know that will go away soon. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to be working with an amazing breast cancer epidemiologist who has done so much work, and she did her PhD in UNC, and so it's just amazing to see how networks kind of keep going and new projects happen. And so I'm excited in that realm. And the project that we'll be doing is very similar to the topic that I did at WomenNC, of focusing on racial disparities and actually air pollution. So again, this environmental health piece as well into it. And so it's just cool to see how one project can kind of lead to another. And WomenNC was definitely a huge part of that journey.
Yeah, I know for me, with WomenNC, I was able to really learn how to identify and address gaps in care for women and girls. And so something that with my new interest in public health entrepreneurship, I've been able to kind of tie in the business side of things and also to help address these gaps in care. And so what I'm hoping to do in the future is work in breastfeeding support so that I can address disparities in communities of color. And I want to use that advocacy portion that I did gain in WomenNC to take care of mothers. And so, yeah, I'm just trying to give more of women-centered care, especially during a time when mothers aren't, you know, the center when a new baby is in the picture. So yeah, that's how I'm very excited about my future project.
So yeah, it's wonderful to hear, one, just how WomenNC seems to have shaped sort of things that you're doing now, or maybe even the focus of your thesis and things like that. And just as I think, Jackie, you had said, like your journey in general. And so, yeah, no, you all are all doing very exciting things. I think it's a very exciting time. And again, I can't imagine, or I can't believe it's only been a year since you've been scholars, because it just seems like you're up to so much and a lot more than I was at your time. So I want to open it up now, if that's okay with everyone else, just because I want people to have the opportunity to ask questions that may be in the chat. I think we have some.
Yeah, can we
turn over to
perhaps Cameron maybe to read some of the questions or comments in the chat? I can't do that. I don't multitask, but
there have been some very awesome, wonderful comments in the chat, and also saying how amazing you young women are and how proud we are of you. So I just want to say that to you. And as I noted in there, I just want to say your ability to understand collaboration and feminism is really about supporting each other, collaborating, and establishing your professional life in a way of holding each other up. And that is really important because we learn from each other. So let's see what comments and questions we do have.
Yeah, so far in the chat, we've gotten a lot of questions just pretty much about the meeting itself, you know, so I'll just kind of have a little disclaimer for anyone who's on and has any more questions about that and about the recording of this meeting. If you have a Facebook, we have a recording of this on our live Facebook, so it'll be on Facebook for a while. And if you don't have a Facebook, I have linked a Google form into the chat for everyone to fill out so we can have your email and we can just send you a recording of the meeting after. So if you do need a video, just send us a quick message and we'll go ahead and make note of that and make sure you get the video after. But yeah, we actually have a few people here, you know, just stating where they're from, what their titles are, and they're clearly really, really inspired by everyone's amazing work, you know. I think our last comment was from Miss Barbara. I'll go ahead and call her out. She said that we have a committee called Young BPW for our under 35 members. They try to help younger members develop their professional leadership through many platforms, and they wanted to say you guys are all very strong and inspiring, and that they hope to have young members such as you guys reach the achievements that you have. So that is one comment, but other than that, no specific questions for scholars. So if anybody in the meeting would like to open up and ask a question now, feel free.
May I add something? I received a private question from a 13 years old girl asking that the passionate people in the world, they are trying to make the world a better place to live. I don't understand why we are training new people, the young people, what are their roles? So she was a little bit confused that with this leadership training program, how it can impact the big picture of the world, that to make the world a better place to live. I answered her question, but it is open. Maybe our scholars can answer these questions. How they see their role in a big picture at the global level to change. If, for example, if we replicate WomenNC's program in many parts of the United States or around the world, what is the vision? How does that change the big picture of the world and to solve the gender inequality and human rights violations? Yeah.
I guess I could say a little something. I think something that I've been sort of personally dealing with, I think in the last year, especially with COVID-19 and a lot of the political conversations that have been happening in the United States, is sort of where do I fit in that conversation and what can I do to address any of the issues that are being brought up. And I think often, especially as a young person, it's very overwhelming to see the diverse amount of problems that are just constantly occurring. And I think, you know, with social media, that's just being made even more clear. But I think what's really important, especially for young people, I think to realize is that it's okay to find a niche and work within that, whether that niche is your local community or just one issue that you're really passionate about. Because ultimately that's how you make change, right? Is being very dedicated to something and advocating on behalf of that issue. So I think what WomenNC does is really teaches scholars to focus on a specific niche issue, learn the tools of how to advocate on that issue to local policymakers to try to enact these policy changes that we're encouraged to find within our research. And again, while that's not necessarily on a global level, I think the really great thing that Dr. Wexberg just mentioned in the chat too about local to global connections is that we're able to take what we learn and bring that to this global forum, and hopefully maybe what we learn or our outcomes that we find from our research inspire someone else in a different part of the world to maybe look into a similar issue or how they could possibly advocate for those policies within their community. So while I think it's really easy to feel small, I think that it's important to recognize that each person has a part to play and within their niche to making this a better world to live in, especially in addressing global gender inequalities. So I hope that's kind of an answer to that question. But
yes, very, very good answer. Yes, you are right. We can, this is the nature of our program, local to global. We act local, we bring changes in local communities, we see the impact, and then we share it with the global audience, our experience, and we learn from them as CSW to bring it back to our community. So local to global, back to local. You are right. Thank you.
I also wanted to further what Issa was saying. Young people are definitely having a seat at the table in so many arenas. Like politically, so many of us are involved and engaged. And as you've seen in the panel, so many of us are in very influential roles or agencies where things that we're writing can go into policy, can be used as guidance. So giving us the skills to communicate this well, to be leaders, to actually advocate for it is critical because we're already going to be at that table. So we need to be skilled and effective when we're there. And the gender dynamic component is also so crucial. As I said earlier, I didn't have gender analysis experience. It was through WomenNC that I first started thinking about how gender might affect the research I was doing. And that lesson is something I carry forward and bring into conversations I'm in, and its ripple effect. Other people will start thinking about, maybe they hadn't thought about maternal health before. Now they'll start thinking about it. Maybe they hadn't thought about reproductive health in this lens. Now they will. So educating one scholar doesn't just educate one scholar. It is all a ripple effect.
You could all mute yourself if you're on the call. We'd certainly appreciate it. Thank you. I'd just like to chime in here in response to what the scholars just said as the sort of person implementing the program these days. And that is, we're all about empowering young scholars to understand that within themselves, they do have leadership potential and leadership capacity. And given our program is really not a 4-year college degree credit program, how can we empower young people to understand their leadership potential? One important way is to focus on, to use Issa's term, niche issues, but it's really the local. That's how one way in which to empower people with limited, resources, limited time, all of that. We really focus on empowering our scholars to think about a specific issue in a particular North Carolina community, research it, and come up with ways to diminish the gender disparities through the gender lens that they have discovered. And along with Wendy Wexberg's femtors from RTI, social scientists who help empower our students with the skills they need to do that. That's another way that we empower people, creating the leadership that actually lies within them, empowering them to actually change the world and giving them the skills to actually do it.
I have a quick question for all of the wonderful panelists. I say this every time. You all just blow me away, and I will just continue to keep saying that. And so I'm just curious how you've done so much in a year, unlike one that so many of us currently alive have ever seen. So what is one thing that you would say has kept you motivated? Maybe one tip, one trick, one secret that you've personally found out that keeps you going, that keeps you passionate and on track?
Yeah, I can answer that question quickly, Brittany. I think one thing that has definitely kept me going was finding my voice, and the word that we've mentioned before, niche, finding my area, and being able to use that. Once I kind of got in the groove of trying to push myself outside of my comfort zone, it didn't stop when the pandemic came. I had to keep going because life wasn't technically on pause. And so in doing so, in finding my voice, I've definitely kept that momentum of trying to find other opportunities to continue growing while the world is kind of on pause. I need to make sure that I'm always pushing myself because the pandemic will be over at some point, God willing. And so my goal is that when all of this is over, whenever this is ending, that I have done all that I can during this break time, so to speak, to make sure that I've used my time to my full potential.
Yeah, I will say first, like, it's vision for me. I know what I envision myself to be at in, 5 years, 10 years from now. And like Bridget said, the world doesn't stop. So I have to keep going. I know it's the communities I'm looking to work with, the people's lives I'm trying to help better. I know it's not just for me, the work that I'm doing, but it's for others. And so having the vision, having that drive, and of course, some time management and some organizational skills on top of that, it just helps me to keep, seeking out opportunity and to keep going. So that's something for me, is having that vision is really key.
For me, I think COVID-19 is a great motivator. I'm actually working on COVID-19 issues. So the pandemic, every day on the news, I see how many people it's affecting and how inequity is furthering this challenge and this pandemic. So what's helped me is doing what I love, which is making sure people know how to keep safe, keep healthy, and get the vaccine. Working with people I love, so I'm happy to be in meetings and spaces, and diversify. Some days I'll be working on incarceration issues, and then other days I might be looking at how do we reopen schools, how do we do this? So always finding ways to speak to different parts of my soul and different networks. And knowing that not every day has to be productive. There's some days I just watch TV. There's some days I see friends on Zoom instead. But knowing that some days are better than others, and that's okay.
For me, the thing that has gotten me through this pandemic has just been being surrounded by good people, and people that shared this passion and have that vision as well, because it has been really hard. I think we all know that there are days where you just need someone to lean on and someone to talk to and who can understand you on that level. And so I think, you know, we've talked about this throughout, but just having that network or just having that village, that tribe, that support system that you can go to, you know, leaders also need help sometimes. And so that has been really important to me.
I think for me, so I think I'm the only panelist here who is not in a degree program right now, and it was really difficult finding a job and finding something to do. And so during that time when, you know, I wasn't working and I was trying really hard to find a job, but it was just really, really difficult. I think the thing that kept me motivated and kept me going was sort of finding those personal escapes too. I think it's really easy to sort of view this time, and I know my experience as a student in the first semester when all of us were sort of online was that people kind of expected this pandemic to bring extra time, but the reality is that's just not the case for so many people, whether you're forced to take on extra jobs in order to support your family or something else. So I think for me, something that's kept me motivated was just sort of finding those personal escapes and moments where I can, like Nyla said, you know, watch television or just speak to friends or remind myself that there's good out there. I think that's one of the most motivating things for me, and what really kept me sane during a process of writing a lot of cover letters. Yeah.
I have a question from Facebook Live. Am I interrupting someone who'd like to comment on that? The ways in which you coped and kept yourself motivated?
Maria, I was texting back and forth with Felicia. We had a young 13-year-old raise this question and Felicia thought it was answered, but I just want to add one note on the issue of people who are born leaders versus being trained. And I just want to point out, people have different personalities, and some are more extroverted versus introverted. And training skills and research is unique. People don't learn skills to do research to address gender inequality. And to be a leader, to take that and do something with it. Some people may be more bold, and some people have to find their voice. So I think there's a spectrum of how people work. And I think when we talk about training, it is also supporting with methods and skills and supporting, but everybody is different. There is diversity in personality, diversity in voice. And so I just wanted to address that back to our young person who is commented on leadership. So that was all. Thanks, Maria.
So there is a question that Hannah texted to me, and it asks you to take a step back. What inspired you to apply for the WomenNC Scholars Program? You all are here now. We've heard about some of the great things you're doing and how we've hopefully helped you achieve some of those, at least interim goals. But for those people who are on the call, why? There's an application, you have to get recommendations. It's not the most arduous thing, but what inspired you to apply to become a WomenNC scholar?
I can answer that really quickly. I think the thing that most attracted me initially to the program was definitely the opportunity to sort of have this global experience at UNCSW. But I think for me, I was in my third year of university going back and forth of, well, do I want to do an undergraduate honors thesis? Do I want to do another independent sort of capstone project? And I think the thing that attracted me most to WomenNC's program was this advocacy component that went beyond sort of creating this academic project, that I would be able to not just have this really in-depth research experience on an issue that I was passionate about, but also that I would be able to gain skills on how to communicate that information to policymakers and to a different sort of audience than would necessarily be afforded to me if I had decided to pursue sort of a more academic honors thesis. So I think that's really what inspired me and motivated me to apply to this program, is both one, the chance to be able to go to such a wonderful event like the CSW, but also the chance to gain skills that I wouldn't necessarily have been able to gain in other sort of capstone research experiences.
Yeah, I think for me, applying was the mentorship aspect of the program that really got me. I was really in between trying to figure out what I wanted to do after graduating, since this is a program that happens your senior year. But I knew I was interested in women's health, and I knew that with the RTI International, having our femtor come from that, it would help us to get exposure to public health. And so for me, I really like that aspect of having my femtor tell me more about her experience in the field and just help me walk through the process of doing research and advocacy, and having someone kind of like hold my hand in a way was kind of helpful, and just giving me that exposure and giving me the experience, and also learning like skills like public speaking. And it was just really helpful in developing me as a student and as a professional.
I was inspired. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay. I don't know if we all should answer this or not, but I'll just share that I was really involved in spaces on my university campus that focused on gender equity. I was involved with Planned Parenthood and a club that focused on menstrual equity, and I knew that I wanted to go into public health research. And so for me, WomenNC was such a natural next step in my journey. And I'm grateful that I had this opportunity, because I wouldn't have been propelled into my master's degree now, but I'll let Kim go.
Yeah, I was just gonna say there's another question in the chat, and that was like a really good segue of what Sienna said about her femtorship. This question says, you know, they're interested in the logistical aspect of how the femtorship works, as in how the femtor and femtee are connected, how the femtorship curriculum, and they're asking, is the Global Gender Center a platform with where the advocacy are presented? They would like to know the relationship between the Gender Center and WomenNC.
Well, Maria could answer as far as WomenNC, or we both could. But the Global Gender Center is a center that has research around the world, as I started. And I put out a call to ask our affiliates if they're interested in femtoring our new scholars, which we will have 8 new ones coming now that applications are due. And we work a couple of hours a month with the students in setting up the research. And as Maria mentioned, we're going to actually spend a little more time this coming session, because we find that students, in wanting to do the research, really need to understand the methods in the beginning. So if they have to go through ethics or an IRB with their university, we have to start early. So that's why we're starting at this in the next month or two, so that we can do a lot over the summer. And so how we do a match, it's kind of like a dating game. And we're going to involve the femtors with actually selection this time around, so that they'll know from the get-go, instead of having to do what we did in the past as a sort of a dating match, to say, would you like to be matched well with your scholar? So femtor, femtee. And that's kind of how it works, but it's sort of an extra, it's not part of their regular research day. It's a little extra work that they do, and I'm really grateful. Felicia Brown's been a femtor. Brittany Howard, who's on, has been a femtor. I don't see other people on. They can speak to that. And Maria can talk about on her end how we bring it all together.
Well, as you all are gathering your thoughts, because I got to do that when Wendy was speaking, but I will say this, I hope that you heard a little bit when the scholars talked about their femtors. The relationship works differently, and that's the beauty of the individual femtor-femtee relationship. In the time of COVID, you know, we envision this upcoming cohort will be talking with each other over Zoom and Google Hangout and FaceTime and that sort of thing. But whether you meet in a coffee shop, as we heard Bridget speak about, whether, I can't remember who, but another one of our scholars oftentimes went over before in the pre-times to RTI. To actually work in a space at RTI. I know in past years, we've had femtors who haven't been resident in the United States. So even before COVID, we had relationships budding remotely between femtors and femtees. And then, as I also said very briefly, we come together, perhaps virtually this year for at least part of it, in workshops where we address very specific topics like public speaking and presentation, like how do you engage correctly in social science research? And we do that together as a group. So we not only have bonding between femtors and femtees, but the scholars themselves, AKA femtees, who are from different places. I'm betting that Jackie Lanning did not know Isa Vanderdrift before they became WomenNC scholars. They're at different campuses, and now they have a relationship because of WomenNC. So we also try to hook scholars up to act as resources for each other. So that's, it's a very fluid thing. There are these set workshops, but how that individual relationship works varies in the dyads that we have. We also, though, do have a femtor-femtee agreement in which certain things are laid out, like we will talk at least every other week. How should we talk? Is it text? Is it telephone? Is it email? So that the dyads understand well how each one of them works. So it's really a very individualized things within a parameter. And let me just say one more thing that was kind of not mentioned outright, but I think was implicit that I've heard from scholars from other cohorts. And that is when each of those scholars were doing their presentation and talking a little bit about where they have been, where they're going, and what their project was. I hope you noted the diversity of projects that the WomenNC scholars engaged in. And importantly, that was original research. So they were not part of a research team. They didn't have somebody telling them what to study, what gender disparity, what kind of gender disparities they should explore. Instead, together with their femtors, these scholars figured out, it's disparities in maternal oral health in the eastern part of North Carolina. Oh, it's dress code policies that disproportionately affect African-American girls. And so there is this originality in the work that our scholars do that, once again, we believe is empowering and is also contributory to their leadership, to their understanding of themselves as leaders. So I just wanted to throw that out. But anyway, I'll be quiet now.
So we're really down to the last 2 minutes of this session, and we've really kept a lot of people, and thank you. We're really just so proud of our scholars and where they're going and what they're doing. And we want to thank Dr. Felicia for moderating, and for Maria, and for Beth, our Shiro, who started this organization. We have an incredible board right now. It's really strong. And I know there was a question about how does somebody become a femtee. I just want to reiterate, this is an agreement we have with our local universities who offer scholarships for the students to become a femtee, and then students have to apply with an application being a student in the local university. So I just want to make sure that that is clear how that works. So that's with my ending. I want to say it's going to take all of us, not just one person, but each one of us makes a difference for all of us to address gender inequalities. And I don't know who else wants to also end with their moment.
Well, I want to end with a housekeeping moment and then I'll be quiet. We need to know who you are, you who are on this call, you who are listening to us both here on the platform as well as you on Facebook Live. If Hannah and Cam could once again put the link into the Google Doc in the chat if you haven't already done so, I would appreciate it. We would love to continue the dialogue with you, answer questions that we haven't been able to address in the time period. We want to continue to engage with you, so please help us by clicking on that Google form so we know who you are. Thank you. And then that's it from my end.
Anybody have any other comments? Except that we thought our scholars were awesome.
Yes, they were. My only comment is this next 2 weeks, there are more than 550 events at the CSW, and it is really beneficial if we can find time to join these meetings and to learn from this global experience. I know that our scholars are busy with the school, but if they can participate in some of these events, they see their own place where they are at the global level.
All right, well, with that, I think we will say goodbye.
We thank you all for coming.
Joining us. Yes, thank you. And we hope to be in touch. Fill out that Google Doc so we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, scholars. You're awesome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Hannah, I'm thinking that I will end the recording now, and we should be able to have the chat, and we have a Google Doc with our emails, with the contact information. So once again, thank you all. I'm going to end this meeting right now. Bye-bye.